Hello and welcome to another episode of News from the Gelding. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about Thraxas, a series of books by Martin Scott. I'm going to be talking about a series of 8, although I know I think there's 3 more that I haven't read. But as I've just finished the last one of the original 8, I thought I'd talk about them as a recommendation for you all. Now, fancy a bit of that? Join me in a moment and I'll be right back with you. Oh, hello. Welcome back. Okay, so before I begin, I'll do my usual thing and plug my own book. Not that it will make much difference, as no one's buying it. But anyway, there it is. Fantasy novel about a man from our world who finds himself in another world. Haha. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, so recently I finished the final installment of the Thraxas series. What is Thraxas? Let's begin there. I'll bring up the first cover of the book I ever got, and as usual as these things go with me, I bought it on the strength of the cover. It looked quite interesting. In fact, I bought the first 3 in a kind of I belonged to a fantasy book club back in the day, and I just thought I'd take a punt on it. It was many years before I actually got around to reading it, but I did in the end, and I quite liked it. So what's it all about? So now this is a fairly light-hearted take on fantasy, but from the viewpoint of a private investigator, which is quite a strange thing in itself for a fantasy genre. I'm not sure if there are, perhaps there are other books around that focus on the same kind of ideas, but I've never come across them. This one has a humorous, light-hearted take on this central investigator called Thraxas and his bumbling attempts at solving various mysteries and crimes in the city-state of Turai. Now, he's a failed... He used to work in palace security as an investigator for the royalty, but has since fallen from grace through drinking too much. So we find him now, I think he's in his early 40s, same age as me now. He's overweight, he's still drinking too much, smoking mild drugs, and generally just debauching himself. And he's aided by a young woman who happens to be quarter orc, quarter elf and half human or something like that. And she's a barmaid at the tavern that he lives above. So it's quite funny in a way. I mean, he's gravitated towards the tavern, lives above it, so he's got a ready supply of ale. Anyway, she's the barmaid there, and she wears a chainmail bikini, which is, I don't know, a bit strange. But she's also a fantastic swords woman. And so she ends up saving his life quite regularly. He's also a failed magician, so he can do a couple of spells here and there, but nothing to write home about. But the ones he does manage to remember often save his life. Okay, so as much as I enjoy these books, and I've carried on buying them and reading them, there are some issues that I have with them, which I'll probably go into detail in a bit. So I'm not slagging this off by any means, because I'm recommending it. But yeah, there are issues. Right, I think the first thing, let's bring up all the books. So the pictures I'm going to show now are of the copies I own. So I photographed them. And I'm going to talk first of all about the cover art itself, which is always important to me. So in order, we have got Thraxas, the original, winner of the World Fantasy Award, in fact, which I'll come back to. Then we've got Thraxas and the Warrior Monks, Thraxas at the Races, Thraxas and the Elvish Isles, Thraxas and the Sorcerers, Thraxas and the Dance of Death, Thraxas at War, and finally Thraxas under Siege. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are 3 more books, but they're self-published by Martin Scott. I don't think, who was it published by originally? I think it was Orbit. Yeah, Orbit. I don't think they wanted to take on any more of his work. I don't know why. I think there was some kind of disagreement with regards to the to money, I suppose. But I don't think it was Martin Scott himself, but his agent or something like that. I saw something on Wikipedia about it. Anyway, I haven't read those 3 yet, but I think I will. Nice bit of tea there. Okay, let's bring up the first 3. These are the first 3 I bought. Okay, these covers are brilliant, I think. They're by Julian Gibson. And for me, they really distill what the books are about. Whimsical, humorous, and the central character, Thraxas, being overweight and all that. It conveys his character well, and I imagine him looking just like that. And they're quite nicely composed. They're all on the kind of slant, so it gives it a bit more interest. And they're very well done, I think. If we bring up the next ones, so I think Orbit must have done a reprint, and as the new books were coming, and they adopted this other style of cover by Mark Thomas. In my opinion, these are not as good. They're far more simple, and I think perhaps done on the cheap. I don't know. I mean, these look like they've been knocked up pretty quickly, in my opinion. I don't like these black vignettes around the book and the black cover. I think it's not so good. If I had encountered these covers from the beginning, I would have never read it. I wasn't really feeling it. If they'd kept the original style throughout, I think it would have looked really amazing. But perhaps this was a constraint in terms of the amount of money they're willing to spend, because these original covers obviously taken a significant amount of time to create. Okay, and the last 2 that I got, these are American imprints by Bain, I don't know how you pronounce it, but anyway, these covers are good. I mean, they're better than the last ones, but they've got a slightly more serious tone, harking back to perhaps, I don't know, old 70s style fantasy covers. Scantily clad lady there in Dance of Death, and portraying Thraxas as some brave hero, which he isn't, although he does like to fight and is quite good at it. Doobie-doo. Okay, there we are. There's the covers. Now, if you see the covers that, as I currently understand they are for the self-published ones, they are even worse. I mean, they're not really worth having as covers. It looks to me as though a stock image has been purchased and kind of recropped for each book, so it more or less look like the same book, but with different title each time. I think it would benefit with an overhaul, the whole thing. Just go back to Julian Gibson, get it done properly. But yeah, it's money, isn't it? I mean, Christ, I know that the amount of time I spent on my own cover, and hardly anyone's bought it, the amount of money that would have cost for me to pay an artist to do for me, I've never got it back. Obviously, it's a different way of dealing with a published author like Martin Scott. You get that recouped, obviously. But it's all about money at the end of the day. Okay, so where's I going to go now? Okay, some of the drawbacks. Well, no, I'll talk about the things I really like about it first. So We are talking about murder mystery, various other mysteries, but with a magical edge to them. Thraxas is bumbling. He's more interested in getting drunk most of the time, and his life saved often by Macri, the young elvish orc human woman. And I like the imagery. I like the sense of the city they live in, Turai. It's well described, I find. The various streets. There's no map actually included, but it paints a very vivid portrayal of a living, breathing city, in my opinion. It's quite humorous. It's never made me laugh or anything, but it's humorous. And I like the escapism more than anything. If I'm feeling particularly down for whatever reason, these are one of the books I'll turn to. It's a nice little escape. What was I going to say? Yeah. So it's twisty and turny, and there's usually a nice twist at the end. Some of the things I'm not so keen on are, so for example, the first book, Thraxas, it won the World Fantasy Award, a prestigious award. I even went online to find when it had won it, and I'm kind of amazed that it won it, to be honest, because it's nothing. It's well written, but it's I don't think it's good enough to have won that award personally. But anyway, it did, and I think they've been trading on the fame of that ever since to sell subsequent books. In fact, it's written on every single book, even though it was only the first one that won the prize. I suppose it might have been for its originality, perhaps, but in terms of its humour, I mean, it's nothing compared to, say, Terry Pratchett, which is vastly superior in my opinion. But it's still it's funny. It's funny. And the other thing is, of course, it's light-hearted, but it's also the mystery side of it and the sleuthing part of it. It's not Agatha Christie here. We're not talking about great complexity. Often it's Deus Ex Machina kind of situation where the very ending, something will just come to light that solves the mystery. But sometimes there are hints throughout the book that lead you to perhaps suspect who the murderer will be or where the hidden magical doodad might be. But nothing too complex. But that aside, I don't think it's supposed to be, it's obviously not serious. It's escapism, pure and simple. So there we are. There's the recommendation. If you're a fan of fantasy and fancy trying something a little different, and you've read all the Terry Pratchett books, I'd give this a go. I'm going to try the next 3, and if there's similar to the ones I've already read, I'm going to be quite happy with those. Well, there's no thing. No. What was it? It doesn't matter. Yes, give it a go. Why not? Right, let's leave it there. Bloody terrible. Okay. News about my own second book that I'm writing. It's going slow. As I've said before, the way I write, I tend to explore it as I go along. So I've reached a point in the book where it's gone off at on a side juncture that I wasn't anticipating, and so I'm having to write through it just to see where it goes. It may or may not be used, but yeah, just working through that at the moment. It can be a little bit demoralizing in some ways, because I could be ploughing a hell of a lot of time to something that will never even see the light of day. But anyway, that's the I've made my bed and I've got to sleep in it. Right, that's all for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching this far, if you have made it. I'll be back next week, but I'm not sure with what. What am I reading at the moment? Next book I'm reading is Clive Barker's Books of Blood. I've never read any of his early horror work, and so I was really eager to get into these, and they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it reaffirms in my mind that he is one of the very best writers of fantasy there is. Absolutely brilliant. I don't know how old he was when he wrote these, but he must have been fairly young. And it's mind-blowing stuff. Anyway, there we are. This is my little bit of Clive Barker patronage there. Seek those books out, the Books of Blood. Brilliant. Okay, let's end it there. Cheerio.